I'm Rob Skinner, and this is the Rob Skinner Podcast. In this episode, I talked to Chris and Kim Reed from Salt Lake City, Utah. Chris and Kim spent years planting and leading churches in Sweden and Denmark. They talk about why you should find your purpose first before finding your partner, how to keep your faith in a world going away from God, the value of saving a single soul, how to avoid wasting matches on wet wood and instead finding the inflammable few, how prayer saved their daughter's life from liver cancer, and how they've managed to have 13 people baptized during COVID in the first year of their time in Salt Lake City. All this and more on the Rob Skinner Podcast. Welcome back to the Rob Skinner Podcast. My goal is to inspire you to live a no-regrets life, to make this life count, and to multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Chris and Kim, welcome to the program.
Good to be here.
Hi, Rob.
How'd you guys become Christians?
I became a Christian way back in 1981 in the Boston Church of Christ. I came from a very religious background, raised Pennsylvania around the Amish and the Mennonites and super conservative Bible people, but being kind of a science-oriented guy and not getting answers for my questions and seeing a lot of hypocrisy, I completely rejected that and read like Buddhism. I read the Quran, I read the Bhagavad Gita, I read all kinds of stuff. And I came back around that the Bible's true, but then I couldn't find any church following it. So I prayed. I actually was actively looking, church shopping for a church of the book of Acts before there was a denomination. I prayed that every morning and every night. And I ended up going to school in Boston, not knowing about the church or anything. And I had been praying that for 8 months about a church in the book of Acts. And that very first week, I saw on the dorm door of a guy down the hall from me, a note about a free church bus picking up students to go to church. And I read his note, and it wasn't even for me. And I said, well, I know that can't be, some major denomination. It's got to be some kind of Bible church that does that sort of thing. So I went and I brought 3 of my friends with me to the bus stop, and it turned out to be Bring Your Neighbor Day for what was then the Lexington Church of Christ. And the amazing thing was that sermon that day was give me that old time religion. And in the intro, as Kip started to preach, he said, who we are is we're the Restoration Movement trying to be the church in the book of Acts before there was denominations. He literally said my prayer in the intro.
Wow.
I was a Christian 7 weeks later, and all 3 other people who came to the bus stop also got baptized. So,
Okay, so what were they passing out at the bus stop?
no, they weren't passing out anything. I saw a note on a guy's dorm door down the hall from me about this church bus, and I took myself there. I took myself and 3 of my friends because I was sharing my faith already, And that was kind of they asked me at the bus stop. They said, "Whose neighbor are you?" And I got kind of embarrassed, and I said, well, I actually read somebody else's note, and do I need to buy a ticket or pay something? I'm sorry. I was never actually invited to this. So that's how it started.
So you kind of turned yourself in, so to speak.
I did.
That's crazy. Okay. That's amazing that you were looking so specifically like that. That's pretty powerful. How about you, Kim?
Unlike my husband who turned himself in, I'm more like the person in the parable where I stumbled upon the pearl of great price. So I grew up atheistic. My family's, they're kind of intellectual granola hippie people in a way, up from northern New England. And I didn't know a single person that went to church in my family or friends. I just never held a Bible. It was just foreign to me. I didn't even think about God. So, my parents are very, they encouraged us to do a lot of living, like try it, just don't indulge in it. So I did a lot of living as a young person, trying and experimenting with relationships, sex, drugs, rock and roll, the whole 9 yards, nature, adventure. And I think I wound up at university. And at that point, I just felt like I have done everything exciting you can do. I don't understand the purpose of life. And that was what drove me, is I needed to figure out why I was here. I just saw different people living for different things, and I tried it and it just didn't fulfill. So my best friend, after a trip to Colorado, invited me, and she pursued me for 2 years. And I absolutely did not want to become a Christian. I was looking for something, but not Christianity. But through time and through friendship and the love of the church, I just began to see the love of the church and the love in the Bible, and they went together, and it gave me a picture of God. And so I eventually surrendered after much consternation and got baptized.
And that was the Boulder Church? What
No.
church was this?
I became a Christian in Boston in 1982.
Oh, you guys became Christians really close together.
Yeah.
He was 1 year before I was. We were in the campus ministry in Boston.
That's how we met. So she was baptized in the campus ministry at Northeastern University a year after me.
Yeah.
Where were you going to school, Chris?
But Northeastern. I was
Okay.
studying electrical engineering, and she was speech pathology.
Wow. Okay. So you guys just started dating. How'd you guys end up getting married?
How did we end up getting married? Well, I was one of the enthusiastic but ignorant fools in the beginning who had taken a Pauline vow not to get married for the kingdom of God. Me and another guy who ended up getting married named Andy Fleming. It was his smart idea to do that so that we could focus on evangelizing the Soviet Union underground and not have to worry about being attached to our wives. That was the original goal. So I no sooner took that vow than this young woman, I started to get to know her, and I was like, oh man, how's that going to work out? So luckily somebody shared me a proverb about if you make a hasty vow and you're kind of an idiot, you can go to God and kind of take it back. And I was very, very happy for that verse.
Right.
But yeah, we were dating, but I actually thought I got asked to go into the mission field right as we're getting to go to Sweden, right as we're getting interested. And I was praying for God to open and shut the door. I thought that meant a shut door. Okay. And what I will highly recommend to people trying to find their life's partner is figure out what God's calling you to do first before you find a person. And then God will give you the right person for the calling. Because I was convinced, okay, I need to go to Sweden. And that probably means no to this great young woman named Kim. But Kim, our last date together, she said, why don't we write letters back and forth once a week? Because it was before emails and before all that stuff, right? So it was paper letters, a lot like, I guess, the New Testament was written, and you can fall in love with God through letters written, right?
Yeah, we were apart from each other 18 months of our dating relationship, and we did it through letters. We were in different countries.
Wow.
It was amazing. The written word, the power of the written word.
Yeah. And that what turned out to be, I thought, with the willingness for the door to be closed, I think God opened it up for us to have a relationship that I didn't have to make this relationship work. And Kim felt the same way. And she was very willing to do the mission field anywhere. She wanted to go into the mission field. So.
Wow. Okay. So you had gone to Sweden at this point. You were writing back to Boston from Sweden. What year did you go to Sweden?
Us and Paris were the first sent out by Boston foreign language speaking. So it was 1984.
Wow. Okay. Little side trip here. What was it like in Boston in the early 80s? I ask everyone who was converted during that time, what do you remember from the atmosphere? What was going on there?
One thing that I remember very distinctly is everybody was signing up to go on a mission team somewhere. It didn't even matter where. Like I signed up for Sweden because I just wanted to go somewhere. We were very inspired to go and make a difference in the world and take that adventure stepping out of university. But there were hundreds and hundreds of college students doing that. And even the families, I remember, were so active in either supporting or hearing your story or helping with the parents as you're embarking, on your mission. It was a mindset that was there.
It was almost like people came up out of the waters of the baptistry asking what language should they start learning. Seriously, it was almost like that level.
Yeah.
And I think This first time I met a church that Matthew 28, 18 through 20. When I grew up in a very old, traditional, historic 200-year-old church building that had that painted above the pulpit in the church, Matthew 28, 18 through 20. And there it was every Sunday, but it was probably the most ignored verse that our church ever had. And when I got to Boston, it wasn't even called the Boston Church, but the crazy leadership team actually thought, well, this is for us to obey. And it's not for some other church to worry about Africa. We have a responsibility to do the world, and I'd never met a church like that. I met a church that let's do our neighborhood, maybe a portion of the city. I've never even met a church that said, let's take on the whole city, let alone the whole world. And that was just unbelievably infectious, and we thought doable.
That's amazing. Okay, so what year did you guys get married?
86.
86. Okay, so you took off in 84, wrote letters. That's pretty awesome. Do you have those letters preserved? Do you guys still have those letters? Wow. Yep. Okay, you got to write a book about that. That would be awesome. That's very powerful. How many kids do you guys have?
We have 3, 2 biological, and then we got inspired at the Manila conference through Hope about adoption. So we embarked on the journey of adoption and received a little girl from China.
Oh, that's great. I remember that conference, and there was a big push toward adoption. Mm-hmm. But going back to what you said earlier, I remember as a young Christian, I was converted at Berkeley in the Bay Area, and I remember that was the atmosphere too. Tom Brown was leading our church, and I signed up for the Munich, Germany mission team. And I was going there. Tom Marks was leading the church, and Henning Droger were the leaders of that mission planting. I was all jazzed because I'd taken German in high school and college. So I thought, this is my calling. Mm-hmm. And I ended up not going. I can't remember what happened, but went a different path, ended up going to Japan. But I love that. There was such an attitude among the whole community, like, let's go someplace, let's go out and preach the gospel. So that's great. Okay. So you went to Sweden in 1984. Let's just give us an overview of where you've been, because I know you've been all over the place. Just give us from 84 to now, where have you been?
Well, I had just got offered a promotion doing research and development, working on the MX missile as an electrical engineer, when they asked me to go to Sweden. So I was kind of like, well, here the career doors swinging open, and these guys would like pay for my master's degree and all that kind of stuff, right? So I could like refine killing people or saving people. So it's kind of a no-brainer. So I went into the ministry literally the week they offered me that promotion. And I had 1 month training as an intern in Boston before they sent me out. So that I've been in the ministry technically July, it'll make it, I guess, 38 years. Wow. So, and so then we were there until 1990. Kim and I got married and stayed there, and had our first 2 children in Sweden. And then the church there sent us out to Copenhagen, Denmark, to plant that church. Us and 9 other Christians went out and planted that church, and were there for a couple of years. And then we got asked to come back to the States, and we were in Philadelphia, leading the church there for 4 years. Then we were with the Washington, D.C. church in one of the regions, either Baltimore or Montgomery County or the campus, for the next 8 years. Finally, the first time we chose where we wanted to be in the ministry, we chose to move to Denver when we got that opportunity, and worked in the ministry there for about 5 years.
What year what year was that you went to Denver?
2004 to 2009. We were in Denver.
Okay. Got it.
And then we chose to go back to the mission field 2009 till middle of last year, 2021. We were in Sweden again.
Okay, why'd you go back? I mean, you'd already been over there, and you've been back here in the States a long time. Why? 2009 is, let's just go back there. What?
Well, when we left Copenhagen in 1992, we left a baby church. We'd gone there with 11 people, And in 18 months, the church grew to 56.
Wow.
And 8 of the original team had moved back to Sweden. So if they'd have stayed, we'd have been in the 60s somewhere. But then we had to leave the church in the hands of a year-old Christian leading the church. And we also felt that we'd left Stockholm in less than a mature situation. And then these churches were planting. Of course, they went on to plant the Oslo, Norway church, the Helsinki, Finland church, and Reykjavik, Iceland, all got planted out of these immature churches. And so it was a burden on our hearts, because those churches did not really grow after the original planting. They actually began to shrink. And there was a lot of pain, people seeing people walk away. So I'd been praying for 17 years every day about being able to go back there, and tried to keep my Swedish up by quiet times in Swedish, probably 5 days a week. I would do Swedish or Danish to try and keep it alive. Didn't know if we'd ever get a chance to go back there. So that was kind of the impetus that I remember that the elders in Denver were gracious enough to let us go back for a summer just to help over in Copenhagen. And the very first midweek that I came back to Denver after being in Denmark for like 2.5 months, I looked around at a sparsely attended midweek, had more Christians in it than all of the 5 Nordic countries put together.
Yeah.
And more maturity. You had more ex-ministry people and elders and teachers in a sparsely attended one region midweek of the Denver church than all the Nordics put together. And I just felt like somebody's got to go back there and help these churches that have some experience. That's what was on my mind the whole time.
Wow. How about you, Kim?
Well, I wasn't exactly super fired up to go initially, but I do have a heart for the people, and so we originally decided to go for 5 years, and I thought, well, I'll go and just give 100%. And of course, once you dive into a ministry, it becomes your life, and so we just had an incredible 12 years there, this past 12 years, and growth and friendship and experience, and they're truly our heart. So I guess, God changed my heart, and wherever you invest your heart or your treasure, there your heart will follow. So that's what happened for me.
Okay, so you go a second time. Why'd you come back to the States?
Well, because we got advice. We're approaching, we're not going to retire anytime soon, but we are approaching retirement age. And so we were seeking advice from different beloved ministers around the kingdom, and kind of came up with, they said, just really think through how you want to spend your last working decade, and maybe some of the values that are important when you do maybe come off the payroll. So we spent a year putting together a list of what was important to us and prayed about it a lot. And some of the things on the list were, we wanted to be in a very fruitful ministry and really raise up young people. We wanted to be in a place that beckoned us outside, so we wouldn't grow old and sit in a rocking chair, but that we'd be active in our older age for health reasons. We wanted to be near our children. I think that's one of the motivators. Had we stayed, it might have been, you never know, unsustainable to keep traveling back to the States to see family when on a pay scale like that. So we felt like we should probably come be a little bit closer. What were some of the other things on our list? Yeah,
well, I mean, the thing that we started praying about is we wanted it to be our most fruitful decade of our lives, period. In terms of sheer number of people we helped become Christians and number of people we raised up and put in the ministry. Because the tendency would be to kind of slow down, and now I'm the wise sage, and let's just dispense advice and have the occasional baptism. But I don't think that's what God calls us to do. I think Paul turned up the heat as he ended his ministry career, and really, I mean, 2 Timothy is amazing, right? So we wanted to do that, and we also wanted to make sure we were with a ministry that had a conservative view of the Bible and really held that as the high authority, so that we could be an outpost of keeping restoration Christianity alive, and not become just another denomination. And those were some of the things there. And we also wanted to be in a place where I think getting out of the ministry and retiring are big steps in life anyway when they come. So we wanted to be in a place where we could probably retire having worked in the ministry there 10 years or so. And we have our best friends there. We've raised up people in the ministry so it feels like home. And we can go into a retired phase really active and plugged in with best friends and ministry that we built. That was the other thing we were thinking about. So does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Okay. So I really appreciate, I wanted to have you on this show last summer, actually, about a year ago. And I think you'd just come back and I was like, oh, great. I really want to talk to the Reeds because they just came back from the mission field. And I remember getting a hold of you and you're like, nope, can't do it. You know, and I wanted you to come to the small church leadership conference as well. And you're like, nope, I'm going to baptize 20 this fall. And then maybe I'll think about it at that point. And so I just remember going, whoa, this guy's really got some serious goals. I was convicted. I was like, wow, what am I doing? So I look forward to talking to you more about that. But I definitely sense that desire to make this your most fruitful period of your life. So that's awesome. What I want to know, going to Sweden, Denmark, I mean, those places are awesome for vacation, for travel, for missionary work. I go, whoa, now I lived in Japan for 10 years, so that's not exactly a cup of tea either, but I just go, how'd you do it? I mean, not just once, but twice. How do you keep your faith in a post-Christian culture? Because certainly that's the way the States is going more and more so, but I mean, that seems like a very challenging and spiritually sterile environment to go to. How'd you do it? How'd you keep your faith?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I don't know if God prepared me as the right kind of person. But because I grew up agnostic, atheistic, which is how everybody is over there, I can relate to them. So it may, even though these are beautiful countries and they function well and they have everything, they're very wealthy, like Japan, the issue that what they don't have are the ability to build long lasting. I mean, I think they're more relationally challenged. So for example, people will start a family. They don't necessarily get married. They will start a family and then maybe go 10 years and then they'll start another family. And even the IKEA commercials make it seem okay, where the children will go from one household 1 week and then they go to the separated other partner for the next week, and then make the rooms exactly the same to minimize it, that it's okay. But you really do see underneath it all, I think, as I felt, a true emptiness. And I think for me, I just really felt like the only answer really is Jesus has those secrets to relationships, to purpose, and to our whole existence. And I think that those people are thinking about those things, especially the youth. They're really, there's like a spiritual revival in a way, not necessarily Christian, but spiritual, if you will. They're seeking. Mm-hmm. So that motivated me a lot. And even it was not uncommon to talk to people. They like Jesus. They just don't like church. And so therefore it's hard for them to cross that hurdle initially, but they're aware of the teachings of Jesus and how they're amazing. So I met a lot of people like that. So.
Yeah, I think for me, I upped my quiet times. Like I just reading the Bible a lot of the Bible. And I can't emphasize that enough. I think there's too much podcast Christianity out there, not knocking this podcast, but I'm saying, they listen to, a guy's interpretation of the Bible instead of getting into the Bible and reading just the words themselves and taking notes. The old thing, get a journal, get a pen, write down your thoughts, meditate after you read, pray about what can I do about this today? How can I apply this today? Just those basic exercises. And then the other thing, staying in the mission really helps sharpen your faith because you're sharing it all the time. Mm. You're exercising it all the time. And I did not get beat down by the atheism of the people, because when you're in the mission, you're up close, face to face with people who have no answers. Mm-hmm. They're not happy. They're confused. And if anything, it makes me walk away super grateful every time. It gets exhausting having to explain that why you believe in the resurrection from the dead and that Jesus is divine and all that. But it's also exhilarating, and people don't have any counters to that at all. So when you're in the mission, it didn't make me question my faith. I saw emptiness and confusion and no answers, and it just reinforced we have the answers. This is thanks to Jesus, kind of thing.
That's incredible. Okay. But it must have been challenging though, because I remember back in the 80s, I mean, not that this was right. It was like, if you don't have like 100 baptisms in the first year, you're really struggling. You guys were going to a field that's one of the toughest. I mean, you're not going to the Philippines or something like that. You're going to a place where it's like, or even like Russia, right when it opened up. I mean, like 800 baptisms in a year. How did you handle that emotionally? That must have been really challenging for you to go, okay, we've got to have our own standard of excellence and expectations. This is in particular for the older disciples that kind of understood that there was a very high expectation for mission plantings back in the day.
Well, let me just say one thing, I'm going to let you share. I remember we've all talked this through since then, but back in the day, you got moved around by other people's decisions. And we were compared in Copenhagen. It was the same year that Lagos, Nigeria was planted. And we went to a conference where they literally said all fields are equally open. Don't say the culture has anything to do with that at all.
Oh my
and
gosh.
if you're not doing what Lagos, Nigeria is doing, you're probably in sin and lack faith.
Oh my gosh.
And so that was extremely discouraging. And we were kind of good-hearted, but part of me was like, really? I mean, I think there's a significant difference here, but maybe I'm making excuses for myself. So I had inner turmoil over that whole thing.
Well, I mean, you could literally, as we did every day, 5 days a week, evangelize 8 hours a day. And literally, maybe you would get one phone number. Like that's what it was like. So I think the way I would answer that question for anybody, young disciple or old, is that God sifts us. And I think you have to really discern, why am I doing what I'm doing? And do I really believe? And I think we kept going because, we were compared, but we knew that if we love people, God is pleased, and we are trying, and it's God that gives the growth. And we really learned that lesson. Mm-hmm. And there have been very fruitful times in the Nordics, but there was a time when you did feel compared, you were compared in that way. And I just think it was a sifting, as has happened in my life through different events. Like, am I really going to stick this out, or am I going to give up? Each time I'm faced with the why of what I do.
Right. And I think the other thing is, and I'm very grateful for this because it's a character change, that I shifted in value, not the number of souls, but the value of a soul. Mm-hmm. And, like Luke 15 came alive, that if one sheep leaves the 99, Jesus is hard as you go after that one. You lose the one coin, or you have the prodigal son. It was just one son coming back, but all of heaven rejoices over one sinner who repents. Mm-hmm. And so making each soul a really big deal, having a really big party when somebody becomes a Christian, cherishing them, getting to know them deeply. And so that's helped me, where I could be much more of, let's just crank it and baptize 250 people. Mm. That's a glorious thing too, but I think it's more the heart of Jesus to value people more deeply. Mm. And so that's what happened to me, and when we go over there now, like we just finished the trip 3 weeks ago there, seeing the faithful ones, they mean so much, because right. How much was behind each person becoming a Christian. Right.
I'm filled with respect for you guys, because I know that must have been really challenging, because there was so much activity at that time, so many plantings, and there was such a high level of expectation. I think only in time did it become clear that, hey, we've got different fields, different levels of acceptance of the gospel. Just one more question about that. This is something I've wondered, and I want to talk to you about it. I felt like in Japan, like there's like a veil over people's minds. It's where Paul says Satan has blinded the minds of unbelievers. I just felt that so strongly, like, what is going on here? Like, how can people be so universally blind to the gospel? Any thoughts on that? I mean, and this is not it's just a question I wonder. I go, what is going on when a whole country can't see the gospel? I mean, I know Sweden had a Christian period for sure. Germany and those period, there was a period, it has the foundation. I'm sure it's gone, but what's your view on that? Like, how do you view why that happens?
Well, I mean, a lot of times evangelizing out there, cold contact stuff and all that, it did amaze me. Like I would ask people, we changed it from Bible talk, we call it life talk. We talk about ethical issues. We talk about faith. We talk about life issues. And so, would you be interested in coming? And a lot of times, no. Well, do you believe in anything? Oh, I believe in myself. Oh, do you worship yourself? I stopped saying that because people thought I was attacking them when I said that. But then I started asking questions like, well, do you think you have a soul? And it shocked me how many people have never thought of that question.
Right.
Highly educated, I've never thought of that. What? I mean, how could, and I only have a couple of thoughts after all my years. Why? One, there's typically the pendulum of reaction in human history. And yes, it was a massively Christian country at one time, Lutheran, and it was a state religion. When you were born in Sweden, you were automatically in the Lutheran Church, and they took 1% of your gross income in tax automatically. You had to go through a legal process to extricate yourself from the church. That Lutheran Church was famous for being extremely strict and condemning, very hard line on their moral stance, and it was a shame culture. Made you feel completely ashamed if you were a woman who got pregnant in wedlock or something like that. It was extremely shame culture. And I think that when the sexual revolution came in the 50s and 60s, Sweden was already starting to lean away from that whole thing and reject it. And so they've gone the whole other spectrum of don't judge anybody, don't judge anything. It's got some of the most liberal views in the world of the gender issues, of alternative lifestyle, all that kind of stuff. They've thrown off all restraint. It's had the biggest Pride festival, in one of the biggest one in the whole world, way before they were happening anywhere in the world, all that stuff. I think the second thing is they're so extremely wealthy that they literally don't feel the need. I don't need God. We had neighbors when we had an open house to get to know people. They came over and we had like almost 50 neighbors. And one of them literally told me, just so you know, I don't need any more friends, but thanks for having us over. And that was the last time we saw him. I mean, as if that's the way you gauge it. Do I feel this need or not?
Oh my gosh.
I mean, yeah.
Wow.
I'd like to just add one, just real quick observation, and you can feel it here too. But that scripture in Matthew where Jesus says, where the love of most will grow cold. And I think in those societies, I mean, it's quite refreshing to be back in America because people greet you, but there you don't greet people. You don't talk to people. It's cold socially until you break through. And I think it is quite a field for light and for the gospel because, the Christians, we're the light of the earth, right?
That's right.
But I think it's the way of humanity. It's going to grow. The love of most is going to grow cold. And you really see its progression in the Nordic countries.
Wow. Well, thank you for talking about that. There's a spiritual force. I mean, there's definitely spiritual forces at work that it just can't be described. I go, it's powerful when you go to a country like Japan and there's so little, if any, spiritual influence. It's crazy. It's like a spiritual wasteland going there. Anyway, I don't want to get off too much off the topic. What tips or tools, you mentioned a little bit, Chris, about reading more of the Bible, do you use to keep your faith in God strong? Because we're going through a challenging time in the wake of COVID, and a lot of people are discouraged, and I think a lot of ministers are really getting hammered from criticism and all sorts of stuff. What do you do to keep up, to keep your spirits up, to keep positive, to keep faithful?
I thought about that question as you sent it. I think for me, I try to find one lightable woman in my ministry that I can, I mean, not that many aren't lightable, but one who I can walk with and impart the vision to. And that, even in COVID, even shut down, when somebody partners that way with you at the heart level, where they have that desire to change the world and they want to learn, I find that to be very inspiring, and it helps me to keep my focus on passing it on.
Okay, when you say lightable woman, what lightable?
Flammable. I call
Flammable,
it
like,
flammable.
Okay.
I want to change the world. I want to
Okay.
I don't even, somebody who doesn't, somebody who just wants to give their life for the cause.
That's awesome.
And it's not always obvious, but praying about it specifically, and just find, even in the midst of COVID, you can see the people who realize God is bigger than COVID.
Mm-hmm.
You begin to see their faith. And
Right.
I think that's the thing that I gained faith, even from their faith in that sense.
Wow.
And I think if I'm talking to like the ministers of churches, I've met far too many of my colleagues in the ministry spend time throwing matches on wet wood, and they get themselves, and they focus on the people who aren't doing stuff. Who cares? Okay. I would much rather find the flammable few, and you have to be an example yourself of loving the word, loving to pray, loving to help the poor, and loving to share your faith, and the people who are flammable, that fires them up, I see so many guys pull back from the mission. They don't go out and share their faith, but they focus on problems in the church. And whatever you focus on grows. You focus on problems, it grows, right? You focus on lost people, you find lost people who are open. But the flammable few in the church, they get fired up by that. And when that happens, then the other people who might be wet wood, they see you over at the edge of your cave by your campfire roasting marshmallows and enjoying and so they come out of their caves and they go, what's going on over there in that cave? But that's the vision I go around with, thinking all the time, right? And I know what gets me fired up. I'll tell you, when I'm down, honestly, and I don't want to sound like a legalist or anything, but when I go out, like walk out on campus or something like that and share my faith, I don't care if I got a bunch of rejections for a solid hour. I just feel fired up,
Right. Right.
I have an example. So during the lockdowns in Sweden, we were criticized by the whole world. It wasn't quite the lockdown, but there was a period where people weren't going to work. They weren't really going anywhere.
The church wasn't
and the
meeting.
Church really responded to that in that same way. And so what I mean about the flammable, finding the one, there were a few. And I remember in our family group that we were in, there were a couple sisters, especially one, and we're like, you know what? Let's just go out after work, get off our computers, and let's just wear our masks and talk to people across the street and just talk about being friendly. Let's just say people are so enclosed. It's been a year. And lo and behold, if we didn't, and so we would be quite a distance, kind of yelling, hey, but we met a woman who just got baptized like 3 or 4 months ago.
Wow.
After we had left from that time. But we would just go and talk to people. If we could share about God, great. If not, we just wanted to break the ice. I think that's the point, and talk. And others gave into a lot of fear, but there were the few that were willing. So
that's a great practical.
Yeah, we were inspired of doing that by actually Mohan and Helen, who were leading the church in London. And Mohan would go out right when people were getting off from work, and he would yell across the street, "How you doing in COVID?" Yeah. And the last year of COVID, his family of 4 was fruitful 5 times with people they met.
Yeah.
Oh my
that
gosh!
Way, yelling across the street in London. So I'm like, if they can do that, we can certainly do that in Sweden. And yeah,
it's really
so.
fun.
Wow. Okay, so let me ask you this: what are some of the most inspiring stories that you saw where you really sensed God's presence, His blessing, Him clearly working?
There's a lot of them. What were you speaking with?
In the Nordic countries specifically, or
anywhere with God, or
anywhere? You've had a long career. What stands out to you? Go, whoa! I really sense God working there.
It's happened a couple times, I think. well, many times, but more recent examples, you want to talk about the Life Talks in Kungsholmen, and then here in
specifically like blatantly supernatural. The first one I think about for me, and then we'll get to the newest ones. I, like I said before, was planning to go to what was then the Soviet Union with Andy Fleming,
right,
and as single men and try to evangelize underground. So that was a really big dream. In the meantime, we got sent to Sweden and then Denmark. And while we were in Denmark, that's when Andy got the green light, go to Moscow and plant the church. That was back in the day of the fastest communication you had was a fax machine. And I still remember in my office in Copenhagen, you get this fax coming out, and it was Andy announcing, "We're getting the team together. We're going to Moscow, man." And I was so sad that I wasn't with him. And I couldn't leave these baby Christians. We had all kinds of baby Christians and diapers flying everywhere. So I went out immediately to my prayer place, and it was raining. It was like this big heath out behind our apartment. And I prayed, and I'm shouting in the rain specifically for God, lead me to a young Muscovite man who can be an aide on Andy's team and can become appointed an evangelist, somebody who's both a scholar and an athlete and a warrior. That was very specific. The next day, that was about 4 p.m. Next day at 8 a.m, as I'm going on the commuter train to get to university, I see a big guy on the platform who didn't look sweet or Danish at all. I walk up to him, and he couldn't understand Danish, and his name was Misha Rakovchik. He was a Muscovite who was getting his PhD in physics from the University of Copenhagen. Both his parents had been on the '64 Olympic team. He himself was on the Soviet national water polo team as a goalie. He was quite an athlete. He was an incredible scholar. He was baptized in about 3 months and went back to help Andy on the team. And he was the one who preached the first couple of years through Andy until Andy was good enough in Russian to speak. And Andy said he was part of several hundred baptisms that first year on the team.
And what was amazing is Chris, we were getting off the train.
He got on the train.
But you were getting off. And Chris didn't have time to get his number. The door was closing, and he's like, well, here's the address with a slip of paper. So Mikael showed up at our house 2 days later for a Bible talk without any number. He just came on his own. I mean, it was amazing.
Yep. Totally.
That's incredible. What a story. So you couldn't go, but you were able to send. Yep. Someone super significant in the history of that early church. That's amazing. Wow. Okay. Thank you for sharing that, Kim.
Teddy Bernardini's one.
Different miraculous. Okay. This is when we were leading the church in Philly, and I had 2 small kids, and we were kind of always working with the campus. So it ended up being that sometimes I felt my kids don't have the friends, we're not in the family ministry. So I decided to go on a fast from salsa and chips, a serious fast. I mean, I'm serious. At night, no salsa, no chips, and really just committed to God in prayer that I would meet someone who had kids exactly the same ages as my kids. And so I was doing that and kept to it. And I think the faith behind it, praying. And then, so I went to I think it was like a parent teacher conference or something. And I was talking with a woman and sharing about our International Bring Your Neighbor Day and just some of my travels around the world. And she just grabbed a hold of me and she's like, tell me more about your church. I am looking. So long story short, she has 2 children, the exact gender and ages of my 2 at that time. And she was really seeking and became a Christian, Teddy Bernardini, and she's a doctor and a nephrologist. So has since worked with Hope in Philly, just been really a wonderful family. And 8 years later, her architect husband, this gives me faith for the women who are holding out. It took him 8 years, but he finally, with the help of the Gimpels, became a Christian. We had moved on. And I just think about the way they loved that family, share their life. And I think Ron, his name was, really saw and was converted.
That's amazing.
That was really cool.
The power of specific prayers. So that was when you were living in Boston?
In Philadelphia.
In Philadelphia. Okay, Philadelphia. Okay, great. Wow. All right. So can you share about a time when you wondered if you'd make it through there? Okay. A really tough time, because I think there's a lot of people that are going through tough times. And if you can share about a time when you go, I hope we're going to make it through this.
I'll let my wife share on this one because it was the same one for both of us. But it was also another miraculous specific prayer that we saw God move most recently in our life in an incredibly miraculous way. But I'll let you share the story.
So being on the mission field and having two children back here in America, they're adult children, that poses its challenges in terms of connection and just all that. So, but our one daughter got a liver cancer diagnosis and was scheduled for a liver transplant, which is basically a death sentence because they maybe last 5 years. So that was, and we were still over there. So that was a really low point, and they're on their journey. She's also on her journey. So even thinking of that, it just was a time where we felt like, what are we doing? And so we just implored the whole world, anybody we knew, to pray for her. And disciples were praying all around the world for this girl, Vanessa.
And the Nordics even had a fasting day for her, which we didn't ask them to do. Yeah.
Prayed. It was like unbelievable. And we every prayer time we entered, every prayer time on the phone, like every contact, we would always stop and pray. Well, when we came back to have the big meeting, that we were going to have this big meeting with her doctors about this liver transplant, this was during COVID. So I wasn't even able to go. I had to listen in on Zoom or on the phone. Chris was in there. He pulls out the charts. She's sitting there. And he said...
They had just done... So they had done this testing over a couple years of time. And she is at end stage liver disease. And, the clock is ticking. If you don't get we were going to hear if she doesn't get a liver within 6 to 8 months, she's dead. If she's got a year, she's got 4 months. That's what we were going to hear. So they did a whole battery of tests that week where she was kind of inpatient, and they did all kinds of extensive stuff to finally figure out where on the national registry she'll be put on the list. So then he opens up the latest charts and everything else. He talks to the secretary several times. They're back and forth in and out of the room. And then he goes, okay, let me tell you something. According to these charts, you have absolutely no liver disease of any kind. There's no indicator of any disease. There's no enzyme that's off. Every single reading is in the normal category. There's no way I can put you on the list. You don't appear to be sick. So
unbelievable.
It was unbelievable.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
We're speechless.
Speechless. Absolutely speechless. And then
to continue on with that, she previously was also told that she would never be able to get pregnant. Well, the amazing news is she's been scanned every 3 months, turning into every 6 months, turning into a year. Clear. Her scans are clear. She was able to get pregnant and got pregnant with identical twin girls. And just 3 weeks ago, they were born. And she's doing great.
That's
and
awesome.
She has these two healthy, they're preemies, but she has these lovely girls. And again, there was more to that story, but just the specific prayer and everybody praying. I think my own personal faith has grown about really how close God is to us.
Right. That's right.
That he's not a distant God, but that he's near to our hearts and to those we love. And we've got to persevere.
Yeah.
In prayer.
Wow.
And for all those people and all the times that you pray specifically about cancer or a loved one and they die, I mean, my answer to that, and this is what's happened to me, is this was such a specific, powerful, immediate answer that it made me convinced for all the times that God said no to my requests. That was very specifically for a reason as well, because he is fully capable of answering these things. And he is a good and gracious God. And where he has said no, that wasn't, I guess prayer doesn't work. No, he was right there. He heard it. And if it was in line with his will, which involves way more than us, it involves all the other people, the doctors involved, other people in church, other churches, it's way bigger than just me involved. And he saw all of that and he said no. That specific answer made me that much more confident about all the previous no's that had happened.
Wow.
As well.
That's very powerful. So Chris, I just have to ask, I mean, was there a misdiagnosis with your daughter's liver disease? I mean, could there have been like maybe
No.
they were looking at the wrong charts or something initially?
Well, that's how my daughter reacted in the room. She got really angry because she had braced herself for this terrible news. And when the doctor said, that there's nothing in here, she said it's the wrong file, and she exploded on the guy. He goes, I'm looking at your file, and I have all the old images that show your cancer. It's in this same file. Okay. So literally, that's why what he had said back and forth to the secretary several times is, do you have the wrong file? Go and check a second time. Is there another Vanessa Reed, et cetera? And so there wasn't, and this was her file. And it's a big, thick file, so you can see all the other stuff was extremely bad news, and then transformed.
That's incredible.
So,
how did your daughter respond? I mean, how do you respond to that?
I told the guy, I said, we've had over 30 churches in Europe praying for her, and some of the guys even initiated a day of fasting just for her. And I think that's what happened. And he looked at me and he goes, I'm actually a man of faith myself. And I've only seen this happen another couple times in all of my career with this. In both cases, it was tied with a lot of people praying. That's what he told me in front of her. And so she gives God the glory on these things. She really does. She goes, it must be that. And the whole thing with her babies and stuff, they thought she'd lose the babies. It was really risky. She was in the hospital for the last 2 months, right? And so we all started praying again, and she just kept telling the doctors, it's going to be okay. My parents' friends are praying. That's
I'm
what
your
she kept
miracle
saying.
patient, she said.
That's what she'd say.
She's known across the floor. I'm the miracle patient. And it's been that way. Her twins had twin-to-twin transfusion. If you can Google that and find out what that is. But yeah, it was kind of scary there for a while. So
wow, that's amazing. What a story. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about you're in Sweden for 12 years. On this last missionary journey, you came back to the U.S. Why Salt Lake City, and how's it been since you got back? Like what's it like coming back to the United States from Northern Europe?
well, we had no idea where we were going to end up. We didn't have it pegged at all. We were kind of hoping somewhere in the West because 2 of our kids are there, but we really were kind of open. And again, we made that specific prayer list of 7 things. And so wasn't it on that time when Vanessa, was it?
Yeah, it was the time that we came back for this visit to find out how long she had to live. That while we're back in the States, we get a call that the Salt Lake City church would like to interview us. And I got angry. I'm like, what kind of insensitive people would talk to us during a time that we could find out when our daughter's going to die? I mean, I was like, no, I'm not going on an interview. I don't have my resume. We've not thought about it. Salt Lake, are you kidding me? It's Mormon land. No, I'm not interested.
Right.
But we ended up, we were encouraged. So we listened to advice. We ended up going on the interview, and we show up in our interview and we're just like, we hadn't heard the news. We had not heard the news.
We still thought she was going to die.
The interview was before the doctor time. And so we kind of walk in kind of with our tail between our legs, and it didn't even have clothes. We were just not prepared for an interview, but it was magical. It was like, we were all in COVID, 6 feet apart with masks on, talking to each other in a hotel room. And we met with the core leader team, and we just laughed and we prayed and we answered, got to know each other. And it just was really special in what happened in that room, just the connection that we all made. And so we left there, and we certainly prayed a lot about it. And we decided this is the 7th prayer of our 7 things. It was truly amazing. And we've loved it. We've loved being here, and we love the church, and we love the core leader team. And yeah, it's an older church. It's a rebuild, and it has a lot of needs. But I wanted to share one cool thing, miracle thing. And, you asked, what's it been like? Do you want to share about the Mormons or the Life Talk? Which part?
Well, I mean, we started off, the church we originally thought it was somewhere in the 80s, but then when we got here and we kind of sorted through things, it turned out that the church was more like 56, 57, that was okay. Now the church is all 69. So we've been here a year. We've had 13 baptisms. Some people have moved in, some people have moved out. We've had to sort through some things on the membership there. And there's a couple, one from a Mormon background has already made that decision. A second woman is on her way.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to share about, is that you really see God is working here. Like it has been a stronghold for Mormonism, but people are leaving by the droves. And some of the studies that I've had with women, I asked them, so why do you think people are starting to leave? And she said, well, of course, it's the internet. All of a sudden they can talk to each other and they're questioning in forums. They're having discussions and they're questioning some of the practices, and they're realizing, wait a minute, this makes no sense. So there's it must be the time, because we've had a lot of Mormon people visiting, and we've had a number of studies. Some have become Christians, which has been really cool. And then I want to share about the life.
Yeah, the one young man who did become a Christian, the 21-year-old guy, he was only baptized 5 years ago into the Mormon church by his grandfather, who's a teacher. And so this was not a small thing at all. But the Mormons, if you go into they like being called LDS. The LDS, in their church history museum, the very first display is they say, we believe the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Book of Mormon are all inspired by God. So nobody ever told this young man when he got baptized into that Mormon church that he should stop reading the New Testament too. So he read the Book of Mormon beside the New Testament all the time. And the more he read it, the more he's like, wait a minute, these don't agree at all, on his own.
Yeah.
So he Googled us and showed up at one of our park services because he was looking for just a Bible church. Because he said, if I have to do the Book of Mormon and the Bible, what's got more facts behind it? What's been around longer? I've got to go with the Bible when they disagree. So I got to find a Bible church. So that was how that guy, and I think a lot of Mormons are probably in that situation, you know.
Yeah, there's another guy, just to describe that Mormonism is really still going on. One of the guys that was just over here the other day was sharing that his grandfather is a polygamist and he has 6 wives. And it's
43 aunts and uncles.
That's how, and I mean, I looked at him, I'm like, it's real. It's like, oh yeah, they all have their own house right over there, and his is in the middle. And so anyway, but he's another one that's like, I really want to know what the Bible says. And I think that's the thing. The Bible is what's convincing them, and because they still have it around their LDS worship.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. When you guys came back, I remember, like, what, you know, in our communication, I could tell there was a lot of intensity. You must have had a plan, like a 1-year plan, or like, I'm going to go after this. What was your plan coming back to have like an impact? To have 13 baptisms. I would guess that the church had probably not been having baptisms leading up to your coming. The church was shrinking. What was your plan coming into it to really turn it around?
Well, if there's one thing that I've kind of learned being in all kinds of different places, is that the same things work. It's the Bible, it's praying, it's sharing your faith, but it's also finding those flammable few. And then where kind of the mission comes in is to figure out what is unique with these people and their cultural background. And I've made some mistakes in studying with some of these people in not studying some more religious topics intentionally. Like, I was used to converting atheists for a long time. And I had to realize that these people already have a faith, and many of them already have a love for God, right? And to respect that and to learn how to study in a little bit different way, adding some studies and going a bit deeper. But the plan was just simply to do that and to try to get the church to multiply the leadership. We started off with telling the core group that, you know, our philosophy is that the core group has to be a model to be imitated for the whole church. That if everybody in the church was living like this couple is in the core group, in the mission, in discipling, confessing their sin, helping other people grow, loving lost people, you know, then the church would go forward. What we're not used to is a core group where they're just leaders who, out of their own wisdom and experience, lead a church, but aren't leading by example. So that was the first plan, is to get all of the core group being the example for the church. And they've done marvelously and are incredible companions with us in the mission together.
But it took some leaps of faith on their part. So when we came, we decided we're going to have, we call them life talks in the park, and not necessarily Bible talks, although we use the Bible, but we just call it a life talk. And we were going to meet every Friday night, bring a picnic, bring your friends. We'll have a talk about a very broad topic, and then we'll play volleyball. And it took a step of faith. Some of them were like, every week, should we do it every week? And we're like, yeah, we'll do it every week. So we just started. And I think especially for the young people, we would just go around, share our faith throughout the week and on that night. And people loved it. And I do appreciate the way Chris has, we make them a bit broader. We always use the scriptures, but they're topics like, should I always forgive? Or what makes, how to be a good friend? You know,
what is evil and where did it come from? That kind of thing. Yeah.
And we have the discussion, and then we have a lot of fun. And that is where those first 11 baptisms came really quickly in the fall. It's pretty amazing.
So you did that last summer.
Yeah.
When did you arrive? I'm sorry.
We got here about now, middle of May last year.
Wow.
And we're picking up again now. We're starting the life talks now.
Okay. So essentially you had like a church-wide Bible talk, and for anyone who wanted to join, or was it like strongly encouraged, or just if you want to come in, bring a friend?
Yeah, we told people what it was. And since we were new on the block, you're not going to start ordering the church around. But we said, this is what it is, and this is the topic. And the first week, we had maybe 20 Christians of the 57, 58 came, and we had like 4 visitors. But we had such fun, and the discussion was going on. Like even the Christians were like, "Wow, what a question!" And they really got into it. So the buzz kind of got out there. So the next week there was like 30 from the church and like 10 visitors, and it ended up by the end of the summer that we would probably have 35 or 40 from the church and 20 visitors.
Wow,
that was kind of the standard of what was happening.
How awesome is that? That's a great idea. Wow. Okay, so what you're saying there is that you didn't have necessarily a master plan other than just going to preach the Bible, set an example, find other people that want to work with you. You call them the flammable few.
Yeah.
Find partners that are...
Well, and specifically, we're going to get the core group to be really an example in discipling each other and being open with each other and getting in each other's lives, and then being a friend of sinners, and get the core group all examples in that, and that'll affect the church. Okay. That was the one specific we had in mind.
Let's imagine there's a church that's around that size, somewhere between 50 and 100, and has been stagnant for a while, whether through COVID or just simply through age and other reasons. What advice would you give them? How can they get their church activated going forward? Give me a 1, 2, 3. I love little bullet points. What I know you're an engineer, Chris, so I know you can break this down for me.
Well, I had these conversations with a couple people over the last couple of years, and one of the questions I ask is, "Are you inspired by yourself?" I'd ask the church leader, and a lot of times they're simply not, but they're not doing anything to inspire themselves, And they also get off somehow they think that you can stop evangelizing at some point and the church will still know that they're supposed to do that. No, an evangelist evangelizes. So I think that a lot of time the few people believing that Jesus took 12 to influence the world. He really believed a small group doing the right thing, imitating Jesus, can impact the world. And instead of let me try to move all 55 of my Christians. No, find that small group, inspire yourself, get yourself doing the right thing. And then get the rest. And sometimes if you haven't been doing the right thing for a while, there's a need to just go out to the church and say, "I'm sorry, I just haven't been an example for like 8 months, but I'm going to start like I did yesterday. I started yesterday, and I'm going to keep going. Whoever want to be with me, that'll be great." I think that's one of the things. And I think that making the Bible alive, the thing that's been very encouraging here is, unlike in Sweden, where I'd have to have this really fancy PowerPoint and have to tie it into all kinds of current examples and everything else like that, these people here just love the Bible, but it made alive and practical and exciting and current, and really believing that it has the power to change lives. And I think then the other thing is the main guy can't ever get away from being with the young people. I don't care if you're an old fogey or not. Be a fossil. You still need to get out there and be with these young people.
Mm.
Yeah.
Hospitality is the last thing I'd say. A ton of that. Where there's food and there's family, people will come.
Yeah.
You know.
Kim?
You say anything?
I just totally agree. I think, the Life Talk went so well. We're starting to now help. We eventually want to have a North region and a South region in the Park City area. And so, people haven't had quite the faith to kick it off themselves. So we've gone up there. Okay, we're going to have a wine and salsa night. Bring all your friends. We're going to start the Life Talk in Park City. Just being there with them, scheduling ourselves in, has lifted their faith and made them see, wow, this is actually really cool. And so we're starting to kick off now the 3 areas like that. And then we'll still keep the yo pros, if you will, Life Talk going as well.
Wow.
So that's kind of our overall plan.
This is really awesome. Okay. So this Life Talk, like a traditional Bible talk, like you'll ask a question and have people respond sitting around legs akimbo or something like that. What are we talking?
Yeah, well, the way it is in the park, since there's so many people, I stand up usually. So, and then people have their lawn chairs around, and then the inside, they spread out their blankets. So people are on blankets or whatever. Usually show up about 6:30. They eat. At 7-ish, we kick off the topic. What was the one that I talked about where it was about values? I talk about what is a good person? That was one that drew a big crowd. What is a good person? And then I do some research that's like psychological research they've done around the world. What are shared values for character in all cultures in all time that were considered good? And that was some, doctoral dissertation. I read some guys' stuff, and I had some stuff to throw out there about what are shared values around the world and what do you think? And, eventually we get around to, Jesus didn't call anybody good. You throw out some scripture. Why is that? And you talk about it. Then you make an application at the end. You're done in about 45 minutes. And then we play volleyball, and the people who want to still talk, we're available there. And then people come up and want to talk some more about those kind of things. And all the young people have a ton of fun. That's
Wow.
what it is.
That's awesome. Okay. So going forward, what are your plans for Salt Lake City? I'm assuming you're planning on staying there for the long term through retirement.
That's what we're thinking of so far.
Okay.
If they'll have us,
Now, going into the second year, anything, you have any changes or upgrades, anything else that you're thinking about for the church?
Well, we started a group early in the year where I started actively training a small group of men to preach. And very systematic, this is the way you put together a good sermon. And I have them, we've do expository preaching. We're just finishing the Sermon on the Mount, so that they're given a topic, they're given a passage of scripture. It's not just, oh, Sheriff and your latest quiet time. A lot of these sermons I've done some outlines to before. So to get the guys to do well, I give them some meat to start to work with, so that they don't have to come up with it all on their own, but then learning how to do it in a good way. That's important because we want to, as Kim mentioned, this is a long, skinny church geographically, and we can drive easily 60 or 70 miles to a study one way.
Yeah.
So we want to get a northern region going, a central region where the city is, a southern region, and then up in the mountains where the ski areas are around Park City. So that's what we're moving toward, but you got to have preachers and teachers and people who were in on studies with all the leaders in those areas, so they learn how to study with people and multiply themselves. So we're equipping who are the potential leaders to each of those regions. That's what we're trying to do.
Great plan.
And then the ultimate goal is to actually saturate the whole state of Utah. That I think the goal is at some point to every single person in Utah is less than an hour drive from a Bible talk. That would be awesome if we could do that.
Right.
So
right. That's great. Okay. What advice would you give for a person who wants to make their life count? It's clear that you guys have spent your life for the mission.
I don't know if this is revolutionary, but I think to really see what we can do, that we're Americans, not Americans.
Yeah.
Like, go take the adventure in faith. It doesn't matter your age or your ability or anything. God is bigger. And that was our mantra in Sweden. God is bigger than COVID. Stop having fears. Like, God is bigger than you. And to have that faith, to take the opportunities that come your way and live your life to the full and enjoy it.
Yeah.
Going on with what my wife said, I think it was the first thing we ever preached to the church here when we did a sample sermon, but that's this whole idea. In Mark 14, it's the Passover came and all this. Jesus is at Bethany reclining at the table in the home of Simon the leper. A woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. Some of those who were present were saying indignantly to one another, "Why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor." And they rebuked her harshly. "Leave her alone," Jesus said. "Why are you bothering her? She's done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you. You can help them anytime you want, but you will not always have me. She did what she could." She did what she could.
Yeah.
Okay. And Jesus wasn't saying like, she did what she could. He's like, what she could do, she did it, man.
Yeah.
And maybe her only prized possession in her whole life was this jar of perfume. That was her only thing. And it was expensive and she couldn't halfway do it. Like, she had to break this jar. And her whole attitude, Jesus loved. She had one thing she could do and she did it, And I think that's, every church has the Holy Spirit there. Every church has the word. Every church has willing souls. There might not be all the people, might not be the majority of people, but there's a she did what she could part to any church. And to focus on that, God always multiplies that, always. So that's what I agree with my wife there.
Chris and Kim, thank you so much for your time. And it's so inspiring to hear what you're doing in Salt Lake City, what you've done in the past, and continue to do going forward. May God's blessing just continue to rest on you guys. And so we're happy that you guys are closer to us. I know in the West, it's not, seems close, but not really, probably about 1,000 miles, but it seems like you're practically neighbors. And I look forward to crossing paths in the future. So thank you.
Thanks for having us, man. Love you, bro.
Thank you so much for joining the Rob Skinner podcast. If you're enjoying this podcast, please hit the subscribe button and let your friends know about it and how to find it. Because my goal is to inspire you to make this life count, live a no regrets life, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Have a great day and make this life count.